Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bible Basic Bible Study. Tonight, we're going to be talking about, well, we were going to be talking about the first chapter of a couple chapters of Exodus, and we still are, but those of you who were here last week know that we got cut off. It wasn't just here on my end. A lot of Antietam people lost service last week, so sorry about that. So we're going to backtrack just a little bit when we get into it. Please say hi to each other in the chat if you're willing to do that. Tell us where you're watching from. Love to hear from you. As always, we're taking one basic Bible story at a time. And if you would like to have in advance a copy of what we're going to be doing each week, just shoot me an email at the email address below, and I will send you out the paraphrasing and I'll put together what we do. So we got a number of people. Oh, here we go. John, we got a lot of people watching, but only John has said hi so far. Hi, John. Good to have you here tonight. Unless we're actually up again on the chat out. Well, we'll see. Anyway, so let's go ahead and open with a word of. Oh, and after our lesson tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about the Methodist Church, and then we're going to talk about other stuff going on in the world of Christianity. Hey, hello, Joan. Welcome. Let's go ahead and open a word of prayer, shall we? Gracious God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, for you alone are our rock and our redeemer. Amen. All right, folks. So, Exodus chapter 1 at the very beginning of chapter 2. Hello, Barbara. Listen for the word of our Lord. Joseph and the rest of his generation eventually died, but their descendants were very fertile. The Israelites multiplied until they filled the land. A new Pharaoh, audio is a little off. Uh-oh. Like a little closer. Hopefully that'll help a little bit. Starting over again. Hope it sounds a little better. Joseph and the rest of his generation eventually died, but their descendants were very fertile. The Israelites multiplied until they filled the land. A new Pharaoh came to power, and he knew nothing about this. He told his people, there are too many Israelites here, and they're stronger than we are. We need to deal with this situation. If they grow any stronger, the war breaks out. They may side with our enemies. Taskmasters were assigned to oppress them with forced labor. They built the cities of Pithom and Ramses, which were storage complexes. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied. Egypt began to fear the Israelites, so they became ruthless. They made their lives unbearable, making them do everything from construction to farming. The enforcement was merciless. The king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives. One was named Shiphrah, and the other was Puah. He said, when you help the Hebrew women give birth, kill the boys. You can let the girls live. But the midwives feared God and didn't do it. So the king asked them, why did you let the boys live? The midwives answered, the Hebrew women aren't like Egyptian women. They're strong, and they give birth before we get there. The Hebrew people continued to multiply and grew strong. Because the midwives respected God, he blessed them. Pharaoh commanded the people, whenever a Hebrew was born, throw it into the Nile. Only let the girls live. A Levite couple had a son. When the mother saw how beautiful he was, she hid him for as long as she could. After 3 months, she couldn't hide him anymore. So she took a papyrus basket and waterproofed it with tar and pitch. She put the baby in it and placed it on the very edge of the river among the reeds. His sister kept watch from a distance to see what would happen. Pharaoh's daughter came to the river to bathe. She saw the basket stuck in the reeds and sent a servant girl to get it. When she opened it, she saw pain. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. She said, this must be one of the Hebrew babies. The baby's sister approached and asked, do you want me to get a Hebrew woman to nurse the child for you? Pharaoh's daughter said, yes, go. Jeff Long says the audio is unintelligible. No doctor also says the audio. Hey, I'm beginning to wonder if the free streaming services cracked up. All right, folks, to get this out. Garbled and warbled. Check 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Check 1, 2, 3. Oh, that's terrible. I don't know why that's happening. I'm going to change microphones. Okay, I'm changing microphones for a minute. I'm going to change back again and see if that helps. Also gonna let me see if that helps any. Let me see if that helps any. Oh, that's much better. Okay. Sometimes you just gotta turn it off and turn it back on again. Man, I feel terrible. Audio is unintelligible. Okay. Do you want me to start over again? I'm willing to start over again if you want me to. Let me know. I'm watching the chat. Do you want me to start over or keep going? I won't do anything until I see a response. Start over or keep going? Go for it. I'm not sure which one that means, though. Keep going. Keep going. All right. All right. So Pharaoh's daughter said, "Yes, go. Go get the go get me a Hebrew woman." The girl went and got the baby's mother, and Pharaoh's daughter said, "Take this baby and nurse him for me. I'll pay you." The woman took the child and she nursed it, and when it was time to wean him, she brought him back. Pharaoh's daughter adopted him and named him Moses because she drew him out of the water. Moses sounds like the Hebrew word for drew. Sorry that everything came so garbled. I did test all my equipment before we started tonight, and it was working. There's no way to test the stream itself, unfortunately. All right, so last week I was almost done talking about the end of Exodus, the end of Genesis, when I got cut off by Antietam. So Exodus begins where Genesis ends. So in the last chapters of Genesis, Joseph and his 11 brothers moved the entire family, which is all of what will become the people of Israel. Israel is his father's other name, the 12 sons, not yet tribes of Israel, but the 12 sons of Israel. And they moved the entire family from Canaan to Egypt, where Joseph is the right hand man of the Pharaoh, and he wields enormous power as the right hand man of Pharaoh. So the entire region is enduring a 7-year-long famine, and Joseph is tasked with rationing the nation's food supply, which he has been storing up for this famine. So Joseph feeds the people, but he does not feed them for free. So the end result, as we read in the last couple chapters of Genesis, is that the people of Egypt watch helplessly as their land and their livestock and even eventually their own bodies become property of the state. So meanwhile, Joseph's family, the Israelites, are becoming quite prosperous and living in the best part of the land. Now, some biblical scholars believe that Joseph's story takes place during the Hyksos period of ancient Egypt. Now, during that era, Egypt was being ruled by a foreign group called the Hyksos, who had come in and invaded and set up their own line of kings on the throne, and they were there for I think about 200 years. And they were eventually expelled from Egypt. And after they were expelled from Egypt, the Egyptians did their best to completely erase any evidence that the Hyksos were ever there. And these Hyksos were from Western Asia, so the same general direction that the Hebrew people came from. Now, we don't know for a fact that that is when this story takes place, but if it is when this story takes place, that could explain three things. First of all, it would explain why there is no archaeological evidence for Israelites ever having been in Egypt during that period. It would also explain why the new Pharaoh knew nothing about Joseph's role in saving Egypt from the famine, because the new Pharaoh that rose was an actual Egyptian Pharaoh, not a Hyksos Pharaoh. And so, if that is the case, that would explain why there's, because Joseph's relationship then would have been with the Hyksos. And that would also explain why the Egyptians were so anxious about all these non Egyptians living in their midst, because being from the same groups of peoples, it's possible that the Israelites that came in during the Hyksos reign were in some, basically allied with the Hyksos. So, whether or not that Hyksos theory is true, or correct, I should say, one thing is clear, which is that now in Exodus, the tables have turned. The Egyptians are now throwing off the yoke of slavery, and they're laying that yoke right squarely onto the Israelites' shoulders. So the Hebrew people have now been in Egypt for too long. They're not supposed to be in Egypt anyway. They're supposed to be in the promised land, and they're not there. So it is time for them to leave. And into that situation, Moses is born. Now, before the baby even receives his name, though, he has this bit of an adventure, right? Because his mother, like all mothers, has been instructed to throw the baby boy into the Nile River. And so she sort of follows the order. She puts the baby in the Nile, but first she builds sort of a makeshift boat out of a basket, and she puts him in the basket, so at least he's going to have a fighting chance in the water. And then the boat, of course, is found by the royal family, and the rest, as they say, is history. So, what does this story tell us about God? God is extremely active throughout the book of Exodus. God's first task is getting the Hebrew people out of Egypt. And to that end, God is about to, in the next chapters, perform some of the most awesome and also the most dreadful supernatural events in the entirety of the Bible. But God also is going to work through much more natural means, people like the Hebrew midwives, and like the daughter of Pharaoh, and like the servants of the daughter of Pharaoh. These people are going to be serving God's plan as well. So God's very active in this story. Now, what does this story tell us about ourselves? People are capable of extreme levels of brutality. And modern humanists say that we're naturally good natured, right? I'm quite skeptical of that claim. On the other hand, the Christian tradition has traditionally held that people are naturally totally depraved and only capable of doing good by the grace of God. I don't know that I would. That's extreme language as well. Um, I tend to think that humanity is morally neutral, which of course is not a good thing either, because that means we could go either way. So that then, given the right set of cultural values, we are capable of doing great things. Given the wrong set of cultural values, we're capable of doing terrible things like throwing innocent babies into a river. So, that being the case, there is no way to overstate the importance of the influence of religion on humanity for either good or for ill. Now, I know some folks would say that they don't have any religion, but the truth is everybody has religion. They don't all call it that. Everybody has a value system. Everybody has something in their mind, in their worldview that they believe gives them a sense of purpose, that they believe, at least everybody who's functional does. People who don't have a sense of purpose really struggle. People who are functional in life have something in their worldview that gives them a sense of purpose and that they believe gives meaning to their lives and is capable of providing for them the things that they need to be successful in that sense of purpose. Everybody has that. Not everybody's conscious of it, and everybody calls it religion. And some people are sort of making it up as they go along, which is perhaps the most dangerous way to do it. Excuse me, still getting over this cold. Everybody has a religion, and the one that we choose is going to make the world a good place or a bad place or just something that never lives up to its potential in the eyes of God. So what does this story then tell us about our relationships with God and with each other? Well, this story tells us that God, among other things, it tells us that God rewarded the Hebrew midwives for their courage in defying Pharaoh's orders. Now, God does not always reward faithfulness, at least not in this life. And anybody who claims that God does always reward faithfulness in this life is they're ignoring a good-sized portion of the Bible, not to mention a good-sized portion of the reality that we all live in. So why is it then that God sometimes rewards faithfulness, but sometimes does not? Why is it that some people get miracles and others don't? Now, the miracles in Exodus are nothing short of spectacular. Some would even say incredible, which would mean lacking in credibility. If we're going to take these miracles seriously, and I believe we need to take these miracles very seriously, then we need to remember something very important, which is that they're called miracles because they are so rare. They might not be rare in Exodus, but they are rare today, and they're rare everywhere else outside of the Promised Land. But they are rare, but they are purposeful. Now, Israel is not, of course, just any nation. Israel is God's chosen nation, and it has a mission that no other nation can fulfill. So God's going to protect that nation and that mission at all costs. When God intervenes in supernatural ways, that intervention has very important repercussions that we are not going to fully understand. So God intervenes directly, sometimes in miraculous ways, when God's purpose for the world is at stake. That's all I have to say about that. So I will say one more thing about that. So if you ever receive a miracle, and I would say that I have witnessed 2 miraculous healings that cannot be explained scientifically, and I avoided a car accident when I was a teenager in a way that I can only ascribe to God because I did not have the driving skill to accomplish what I accomplished that day. So miracles happen. If you receive a miracle, though, it is not for you just to enjoy. It is because God's purpose was in jeopardy, and that's why that miracle came. So the question is, what is it God needs you to do? All right, so moving on to news. First, let me take a look at what I missed in the chat over here while I was reading. Okay, we got a lot of people saying hi tonight. So let's go back to Joan Dawson is here, Barbara is here, John is here, Tom Brown is here, Charles Verger is here, Jeff Long. I don't know who signed as Otterbein. I'm betting it's Cindy, but I don't know. Let's see. Anybody else I haven't said hi to yet? I think that's it. Oh, Judy Kelly. Hello, Judy. All right. So, welcome again, everyone. So, what's going on in the Methodist world this week? Well, a couple of things. One happened last week, which is that the the Wesleyan Covenant Association, which is the separatist group in the United Methodist Church under the leadership of Count Dooku. That's a Star Wars reference. That's not actually who's in charge. But the separatists, in frustration, instructed the churches in multiple conferences, including this conference, the Baltimore Washington Conference, to stop paying their apportionments in an effort to exert pressure on the conference to give them more favorable terms for their exit. Which is amusing to me because, in my experience, an awful lot of these churches don't pay their apportionments anyway, or at least don't pay them in full. So I don't know that we would actually notice that money missing in some cases. But their goal is to leverage because they want better financial terms to leave the denomination. And I'm not on the board of trustees for the conference. They're the ones that decide these things. If I were, I would pay them to leave. And if you're on the board of trustees of the conference, that's my advice to you. Pay them to leave. Because in other news, they have withdrawn their pledge not to file charges against progressive pastors for performing same-sex unions. They have pledged to do that until the next conference, general conference, and they have withdrawn that pledge and are now doing it. So their purpose, I believe, is to make themselves odious enough that we'll do whatever they want. Anyway, in other news related to that, 5 of the largest formerly Methodist congregations in the country that were expected to join the Global Methodist Church have announced that they are not joining any denomination. They are forming their own network of like-minded people. They want to have a loose network of accountability without the encumbrances of an organized denomination. What could go wrong? Finally, the last thing I wanted to talk about tonight. Actually, I was going to talk about it last week, but we didn't get to. The last thing I want to talk about tonight is an article that was in Christianity Today last week that pastors have been talking about in various forums online. And the article from Christianity Today revealed that a recent study of the most politically conservative evangelical Christians in the United States are generally speaking, they are not attending church anymore, which was a big surprise because the assumption had been all along that there were very conservative congregations and very conservative pastors that were tightly aligned with the Republican Party, and that was what was driving the conservative movement in evangelical circles. As it turns out, though, the most conservative of them are not attending any congregation anymore. And if you were to ask them why they're not attending, they would say that they can't find a congregation that they like, most likely. And Christianity Today said that what has happened here is that, so the religion has been subordinated to the political agenda, and they have jettisoned the portions of their religion that does not fit their political agenda, which is why they have felt the need to go rogue and no longer attend a congregation. Now, of course, progressives in this country, politically progressive people, also in large numbers have stopped attending church as well. The difference, though, is those Christians that are progressive politically and have left the church, if you ask them if they're religious, they'll say no, they're not. Okay, whereas the conservatives who have left church, if you ask them if they're religious, they will still say yes, they are still very religious. Okay, so what is going on there? And what is going on there, I believe, is what Camille Paglia said last year or the year before, which is that politics has replaced religion for these individuals and is now functioning as religion. And on the conservative end, they see themselves as religious people, so they continue to say that what they believe is a religious system, whereas on the progressive end, they don't see themselves as religious people. So although politics is functioning as their religion, they're not conscious of that fact. In both cases, what you have here is the secularization of America and how that is playing out in religion. So what you're seeing is that um, people who are politically liberal are secularizing in a way that is very different from people who are politically conservative, but it is two different versions of secularization. Um, yeah, so that was a big surprise to a lot of people. It shouldn't have surprised me, and I'll tell you why. 15 years back, about thereabouts. No, it wasn't 15 years back. I guess it was more like 10 years back. Oh no, it was it was more than 15 years back when I was serving as a pastor in Walkersville. There was a religious group, the Ahmadi Muslims, which are an offshoot of Islam, wanted to build a mosque and a conference center on a farm in the Walkersville area, and there was a huge public controversy over it, and they ended up changing zoning rules to prevent that from happening. Oh, Jennifer, yeah, yeah, Jennifer, I see what you're saying there. That you're a member here and you haven't been here in 5 or 6 years, but um, would come now, but you're just away. Yeah, well, you're participating online though. Okay, these are people that are no longer the part of any congregation, no longer part of any congregation at all. They've probably actually withdrawn their membership from a congregation. These people that I'm talking about. So it's not just that they haven't been around for COVID or for whatever. They're not maintaining any kind of relationship with a congregation at all. So it is different. And I certainly understand that things have been different everywhere, and as church has moved online and so forth. But anyway, so the Ahmadi Muslims wanted to build this center on a farm in the Walkersville area, and the Walkersville Council ended up changing the zoning rules to prevent that from happening. And then there was a lawsuit, and the town lost, and the town ended up having to buy the farm. It was a big stink. Um, but I remember going to these town hall meetings that were packed with people who were very emotionally charged, and many of them were using very conservative evangelical language when they were speaking, and they were talking about this being a Christian town and so forth. And those of us who were pastors were looking at each other, going, "Who are these people? Have you ever seen? They don't go to my church. Do they go to your church?" None of them that we knew of were part of any congregation, but yet they were showing up saying this was a Christian town. What makes a town a Christian town? Um, that's the question. Um, anyway, that's all I have for you tonight. I hope that this has been beneficial to people despite the technical problems. The number of people viewing has fluctuated dramatically over the course of the evening. Surprise, surprise. All right, let's go ahead and have a word of prayer. I like to close with the Serenity Prayer every week because it's very important in my own spirituality and in these trying times where people are emotionally charged. I find that the Serenity Prayer could have a lot to offer all of us. Let us pray. God, give me grace to accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed, courage to change the things which should be changed, and the wisdom to distinguish the one from the other, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking, as Jesus did, this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. Amen. All right, folks, see y'all next week as we talk about Moses.